Ian Begley, welcome to the Sport Profile.
Dylan, how are you, man? It's great to be here.
I'm fantastic. I'm really excited for this. First of all, I've admired your work for so many years. Huge inspiration of mine. And we have a mutual friend in Andy Clayton, sports editor of the New York Daily News.
Yes,
He says
absolutely.
hello.
What's up, Andy? Oh, that's awesome. I hope he's doing well.
He is. He does a lot more hiking than I do, and I'd really like to do more of that, honestly.
That's a sign of a good lifestyle.
It is.
I like it.
We were talking about the podcast actually,
Yeah.
and I had mentioned I was interviewing you, and he lit up because he told me that you were in a documentary about the New York Daily News and the New York Post.
Yeah, yes.
What was that experience like for
Yeah.
you, Mr. Ian Begley?
Yeah, I was
sports reporter and movie star.
they were doing Bravo was doing a reality show about the tabloid wars between the Daily News and the New York Post. And I was an intern at the Daily News, and they decided to follow me around for a day. I was wet behind the ears, didn't really know what I was doing. I was covering the WNBA, the Liberty, and it was fun. Yeah. So I worked like I normally would at that given day, and it was actually the first time I'd ever covered a game on deadline. So it was a bit of a experience on deadline, and yeah, I think they had fun. I certainly had fun doing it, and yeah, it's just funny because I hadn't thought about that in a while. But you bring that up, and one of my colleagues after the episode aired, I'm dating myself now, but he said to me, "Look, man, it's Omarosa, and then it's you in terms of reality TV." So he was busting my chops, but
That's so funny.
it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
I mean, again, I don't want to date you, but how long ago was that? It was
I was an intern.
Early 2010s?
Summer 2005. I
2005.
graduated
Okay.
2005.
Interesting.
And intern at the Daily News summer 2005. So
wow.
Yeah, the Wayback Machine.
First of all, you said that was your first experience writing on deadline. You have two pressures coming from you. You have deadlines from editors, and you have cameras, following you around, which is very interesting. What do you remember from that experience of like having them follow you around while you're trying to work? I can't imagine that was easy.
Yeah, I was obviously nervous to cover my first assignment for the paper.
Sure.
Running a game on deadline. And I was almost so solely focused on that. It's not like I blocked the cameras out.
Right.
I knew they were there, but I really just focused on what I needed to do to get the story done and to
naturally
make deadline. I think what they did was they might have followed me the day before where I did in advance, and then they were with me the game night or I was on deadline, and then maybe the next morning. And yeah, I remember I was proud of my lead. That's one thing I do remember. And I think I went in the office the next day and I spoke to one of the top editors, Terry Thompson, about it. And she told me I did a good job. And so cameras on, cameras off. I mean, I was thrilled. That's
most important,
man. Get some good feedback from your bosses. So
I
do remember that. It's funny. That's a fun memory. I hadn't thought about that in a while.
It is so interesting how times change, how things change, and people being in the same positions or different positions. I mean, look, as well as I do that the journalism world, especially in sports, is extremely close.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. What have been, over the course of your career, some of the stories that have really resonated with you? Just, not like specific stories, but like more so topics that you like to write about. Obviously you're a beat reporter covering the NBA, particularly the New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets now. But what sort of topics have really resonated with you over the course of your career?
Sure. I think it's changed based on what I'm covering and how I'm covering it. Speaking of the Daily News, that paper and that staff, they were very aggressive on their coverage of steroids in baseball. And I just remember kind of feeling lucky, fortunate to be, not that I was in the middle of it, but I was kind of adjacent to what they were reporting on, kind of hearing the reporters on the phone and hearing Terry Thompson talk about, the stories. And clearly it was something that the paper was proud of and something that was important to the paper. And I just remember one night after A-Rod, he got in trouble for having, I think at that point he had a connection to one of the, maybe it was a biogenesis dock in Florida. And the
Interesting.
details are not that important, but I just
Yeah.
remember I got a call from a coach that I had covered in high school baseball. And he's like, listen, man, everybody's missing the story. Like, what's really happening is XYZ. And he gave me a really good detail about
Hmm.
A-Rod and the steroids and all that. And so I was so excited. I just called it into the office, and it ended up, you know, myself and other reporters ended up being a big story for us. And that was the
Interesting.
first time where I realized that information can come from really anywhere and everywhere. And it comes from places that you would least suspect sometimes. And sometimes it kind of just falls into your lap like that. And so
Yeah.
that was a kind of a good lesson to learn just for regarding keeping up with relationships and
Totally.
in touch with people and just um developing a rapport with the people that you cover.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was helpful early on. That's one of them certainly.
That's really interesting, honestly. I mean, I've had that experience too a little bit where like a piece of information will come from like somebody you have no idea would be remotely associated
Yes.
with something that you're covering, and it's like
Mhm,
actually turns out to be super helpful.
mhm,
And
mhm.
it's it's interesting how all of that works because it doesn't get like seen enough really. People always ask like, "Oh, who is the source?" in the tweets that we see where they're citing some anonymous source, and it's like, you know what? It really could be anybody,
That's
you
the
know?
thing, the source guessing or the source assuming, in my estimation, not always right. Sometimes people think it's obvious, and that's not always the case. I say that as someone who in the industry in my head does the source guessing and also
Right.
just having people kind of guess sources on your own reporting. But yeah, no, it's just that really kind of allowed me to be cognizant of information coming from different places where as you're saying, you might not put the subject with the person that's giving you that information, but people are connected in different ways. And it's just important to um, keep a good relationship with the people that have been good to you that
Of
you've covered.
course. Let me ask you about that real quick. You just said, about source guessing. Have you ever seen people guess about your source or your sources? And do you ever say to yourself, like, man, they got it really wrong. They're nowhere near close. Or you find a person like, oh my God, they actually got it right. Has that ever happened at all?
Probably both ways. Probably more so though that I think the assumption and with I guess because I've covered one team for so long,
Right.
the assumption sometimes is that, oh, he's writing this because the Knicks probably want this out there, or he's
Mm,
writing this because the Knicks are, feeding him information. And look,
yeah.
I can say this, having covered this team for over a decade, many years. It's not as if they are out there talking to reporters and trying to get their story out. Now,
Right.
I'm just being candid here,
Hmm.
because being candid's important.
Absolutely.
Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it is, but it's not as if
Yeah.
that front office is calling reporters daily trying to get a message out. That's not the
Right.
case. So, when it's people when they assume that that's the case, I would say 8 times out of 10 that is not the case.
Yeah.
Usually coming from somebody else, and people kind of assume that everything that's out there is something that the team wants to be out there, and that's definitely not the case.
Oh my God.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so those are the 2 that stick out. But yeah, sometimes somebody, um, maybe the way I phrase something, they'll say, "Oh,
Hmm.
well, clearly X was the source for the information on this." Sometimes they're dead right. So I don't wanna
Interesting.
paint too broad of a brush, but a lot of times the assumptions are incorrect.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I figured a handful of them would be incorrect, but it is interesting to see how close people get, or if they do get it right.
Yeah, I think there's generally the assumption for beat writers that they are messaging for the team in whatever they're
I'd
reporting.
agree with that too.
I think that's way off
It's
most of
such
the
a
time.
misconception.
Yeah,
It really, really is.
yeah,
And it's been that misconception has existed for years, right? So, I wanted to ask a little bit, even away from sports reporting. So much of your time, obviously, is taken up by being a beat reporter. You're traveling, you're doing numerous stories a day. Sometimes, obviously working to break news and interacting with those sources. But when you do have that downtime, I know the trade deadline is a huge time for you, and you wanted to lay low after it. But how are you spending your downtime? What are you doing to really take care of yourself and really just be true to yourself at the end of the day?
yeah. I mean, look, if we were talking, man, 15 years ago, I would say I'll be relaxing, exercising, maybe playing some basketball,
Love
or
that.
not doing a good job taking care of myself. I was a grinder, I am a grinder, and like
Sure.
the idea of like, self-care or like burnout, maybe that was part of the lexicon way back then. It wasn't part of my worldview or lexicon. I really wasn't aware. So I
Right.
would kind of just keep going until I learned a little bit more about, the importance of, maintaining a baseline and energy and all that good stuff. But now you could throw all that out the window again because I have two kids. They're a little older now. They're 9 and 7, but
Sure.
when you're younger, man, it was just all hands on deck
Yeah.
at all times. And most of the downtime was hanging with them. And I don't mean to say that, excuse me, in a negative way at all. I
Of
love
course
every
not.
second of it, but it's not downtime. It's
Yeah.
being a dad downtime and obviously being a husband downtime. So it's
Of
different.
course.
It's different, but that's kind of how I unwind, just hanging with the family. Yeah, trying to exercise a little bit
Hmm.
and be a dad, be a husband.
Yeah. I mean, I try to do definitely. I've tried to do a lot more exercising with just the time that I have on my hands.
Hmm.
I've certainly I go through like ups and downs with it. I'll be like really good for like a couple weeks and then I just won't even like touch the gym. But
Hmm.
you had mentioned something interesting in that response though. You said 15 years ago, you were exercising, you were playing basketball and all that, and then, but you didn't really think about like the self-care part of it. Why did that become a value for you? Or when even did that become a value for you where you were like, "Oh, this actually is something I should care about more. This is
Yeah,
valuable to do."
it's a great question. I would actually say getting married and kind
Hmm.
of having somebody who's looking at your habits
Yeah.
from the outside.
You think
And
so?
yeah, my wife would just she would notice that, hey, after a big free agency period, after a big trade deadline, draft, whatever it is, your energy is not the same and you're just continuing to work and,
Yeah.
kind of the law of diminishing returns. And she was like, I noticed kind of a pattern here. So she brought my attention to it and in a great way, in a helpful way. And so she's kind of helped me maintain more of a balance, more of a
Yeah.
balance. She's been great with regards to that. And then it's
Sure.
necessary, especially, if you have other obligations, whatever those obligations are. For me, it's family. For
Yeah.
someone else, it might be something else that they're passionate about or that's important to them. But yeah, it's important to try to maintain a little bit of a balance there. It's a challenge, I would say, in our
Totally.
industry, Dylan, as you know.
Yeah.
It's go go go, especially in this social media era. But it is also important to carve out the time and to
Right.
figure out how to do that.
Is that a hard realization for you? You mentioned how you're being a grinder, then and still now, still are obviously. How hard of a realization is that to you? Because it really almost like it forces you to stop and look in the mirror a little bit and like analyze and assess your habits. Certainly it's hard for it was not easy for me. I'm still going through it, you know, giving myself that grace and permission. But for you, you mentioned your wife was a big help in that, but at the end of the day, it is your decision. How hard is that?
Yeah, I think for me, what I had to get used to was, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but
Of
just
course.
the idea of having those wearing multiple hats, multiple. areas of your life that are important. And
Mhm.
obviously, being a dad, being a husband, extremely important. But before that, before I met my wife, and definitely before I had kids, the job was, one. I don't want to say 1A because I'd like to say my family was 1A, but
Yeah.
maybe being honest, the job was 1A, and it was like that for a long time.
Mhm.
And I can't really rank the job and family, but
Of course.
there's no question now that if it's one or the other, it has to be my kids, it has to be my wife. That's the commitment I've made. I mean, that was hard initially and
Yeah.
still is striking a balance to
Totally.
trying to be your best at everything in all those roles. So that's tough, but I'm sure that's tough for everybody,
It
every
is.
parent, every working parent. I don't think that's specific to this industry. I'm sure every parent kind of deals with the same, um, every working parent deals with the same push and pull. So I'm
Yeah.
sure that's not unique at all.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's always an interesting dynamic to see like that progression and obviously how habits change and how values change. That's something I've always been interested into, which I even want to ask you about like what would you say like within journalism aside from like the tentpole like of accuracy and like trustworthiness and relationship building, what would you say are some of like your biggest values even, for yourself or even your career too?
I would say just maintaining objectivity.
Sure.
That's important to me, and it's important to me to provide the context that you can't maybe provide in a tweet, or maybe now you can because they're limitless, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
hard to provide
If you throw him
significant.
a few bucks.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really important to me is to
Yeah.
be even-handed in whatever I'm talking about, whatever I'm writing about, and to kind of check my what might be not being entirely objective way of
Mhm.
looking at whether it's a person, an organization, whatever it may be. Just making sure that that relationship that I have with person X doesn't change the way that I approach the job. So that's really paramount for me. And then
Sure.
also the idea that you just have to call it like you see it as a reporter, especially if you're covering a team year in and year out. And I think that your value is people knowing that you are just providing information again,
Mhm.
objectively and not pulling punches, but just calling it like you see it. So that's always kind of my baseline and kind of what guides me day to day.
I'm curious about this too in what you said there. And I've heard this from, other reporters as well, that objectivity or, unbiasedness, I guess. Are you able to take that outside of work too?
In terms of how they just look at things outside of work,
Yeah.
I think, it's funny.
It's like you do it so much in your job, you prioritize it so much for your work that it almost
Yeah,
like naturally bleeds beyond that.
yeah, I never really thought about it, but now that you're mentioning it, I think me looking at the world, world events, life around me,
Mm,
um, nearby and far away.
sure.
I do think I probably apply some of those same principles. And with my kids, I'm not biased. I mean, I am biased.
Yeah.
I have a big bias there, bias
Naturally.
family, people I love. But yeah, just looking at things outside of work, yeah, I think I do. That does carry over in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always, I think naturally, I mean, I don't view myself as a judgmental person. I do try to be objective in, every situation. And certainly when I am doing work, I try to be objective as well. But I also just try to maintain like honesty, like a baseline level of genuine honesty and curiosity too.
Hmm.
You know,
That to me is it's the key for us, at least for
sure,
our jobs. Staying curious, staying inquisitive, not thinking you know everything, knowing what you don't know, which is a lot, and I think it's an important aspect of your job to recognize what you don't know, and just humility. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Do you think it's a misconception that, like, even though you have been covering, in this case, the Knicks for, 10 years, yes, you obviously have, like, all the institutional knowledge about the team, covering them for so long. But is it a misconception to say that, like, or to assume that you still go in knowing what's going to happen on a given day, even with this
Yeah.
team?
I think for me, and I think I heard Rich Samini relay this to somebody else. And Rich Samini, longtime Jets beat writer,
Yeah.
Daily News when I was there. He was at ESPN New York when I was there.
Yeah, I
Great,
remember.
great amount of respect for him. He said you have to kind of approach each day like you know nothing. And I think that's the best way to approach it. Even though obviously, I'll come in to a day knowing XYZ is on the horizon, XYZ may happen or may not happen.
Right.
You don't want to have that information and have just because you have that, you kind of lose your edge. So when Rich said that, it just really resonated. Just start every day like you know nothing, and you're at
Mm.
your baseline, trying to figure it out. Whatever's happening that day, whatever's coming around the bend. I guess you go into a day without that mindset, let's say, and you maybe you're not as sharp, maybe you're not as hungry or as focused.
Mhm.
Yeah, when Rich said that, I think that made a lot of sense to the day-to-day approach and the best way to approach it.
Yeah. There's a lot of power in that statement. I mean, because it just shows that there's potential for so much to happen. And obviously, in the sports world, with any sport, things change on the fly every day,
Mhm,
within the hour, even,
mhm.
regardless of what time of year it is, especially around the trade deadline, free agency, things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Whenever there's a general consensus ahead of a big event, whether it's a signing, a trade, a free agency, draft, it's been my experience at least that that consensus, as shocked as you might be, and I was shocked the first couple of times it happened, but it sometimes turns out to be wrong. And so you're always getting surprised. And so I mean, just go back to one quick example
sure.
of Jeremy Lin, his free agency with the
Mm,
Knicks, restricted free agent, was able to sign that poison pill contract with Houston. Everybody going
yeah.
into it about the Knicks would match whatever it took to have Jeremy Lin remain in New York, and it did.
Right.
And so it's just one of those things where there's a consensus that yes, something is definitely going to go this way, and there are a significant amount of times where it doesn't. So just be ready for any and all possibilities.
Yeah. Man, I didn't forget about Jeremy Lin, obviously, but, like, I
Mhm,
forgot that Houston was the first team he went to after New York.
mhm,
I thought,
mhm.
I don't know why I thought it was the Lakers that he went to after. That was
That was
probably a
next.
few.
Yeah.
That was after Houston?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah. I can't have you on the Sport Profile without asking, obviously, about this final stretch with this current Knicks team.
Yeah.
They're in the 3rd spot right now. They can clinch with a Philadelphia loss as of, this recording. Any thoughts about the next few games, this final stretch? Because you go on a 7-game win streak, you're poised to maybe even, overtake Boston if things go right. And the scenarios become win and you're in. And then you lose the last two to two very, strong opponents in Charlotte and the Oklahoma City Thunder, defending champions. But what are you thinking about for these next few games in this final stretch?
Yeah, they have some challenging games coming up here. And so for me, I'm just thinking about that winning streak and how there were only 2 wins in that 8-game streak that came against teams that were closer to 25 games under 500. Most of them were
Really?
teams against teams more than 25 games under 500. So less than 25 games under 500. I think it was 2 of the games. And
Yeah,
then you look at those 8 wins differently when you see that, Oklahoma City, obviously not losing a lot of games at
sure.
all this year. So I don't think you make too much of that, but just the idea in general that losing to Charlotte, losing to OKC twice, You got a Denver win way back when. That I think that was your last one against a team above 500, and so it's been a while. And
That's a
how much
while ago. Oh my God. I remember I was watching that game. That
Yeah,
really is a while ago now.
right, right. So how much can you make of the win streak? How much does it tell you what this team is going to be in the spring, and how much of it is kind of not essential or insignificant? And so that's how I'm thinking about the last 7 games here. There are some quality opponents, and how do the Knicks look against these teams? Do they compete? Can they close games out? And if so, you're then going into the playoffs with some good momentum. But if you continue to sputter in these last, 7 games,
Yeah.
you haven't really shown a lot in terms of evidence that you are a title contender, a team that can win the NBA title. If you're
Yeah.
continuing to sputter to go into the finish line here, because you really can't point to many stretches, multiple game stretches here with the Knicks where they played at that championship level. And so it would be more of a wild card. I think, if best case for the Knicks, gaining some confidence, beating some good teams, going into the postseason, and then you're going in with very good momentum as opposed to the other way.
Yeah, and also, God willing, the team is healthy, and has that depth that they've, relied on from time to time. I love the Alvarado edition. And, I know you wrote about this recently, Deuce McBride coming back into the lineup as well. Do you view him as being an X factor for this team going down the stretch, that final
Yes,
stretch?
certainly, Dylan, certainly. And that's why in that OKC game, and he came up hurting in that game. I think he left in the third quarter.
Mm,
And it's got to be a big concern for the Knicks because I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to diagnose
sure.
anything that happened, but where he was like indicating the pain was kind of the same area where the sports hernia surgery they would work on.
Really?
And so that's a big concern. I mean, your hope
Sure.
was obviously if you're the Knicks, you get him back. He plays these final 8 games, including the OKC game, and he's ready to go for the playoffs. This obviously throws a wrench into that. I don't know if there's been an announcement, a diagnosis
Yeah,
yet
I didn't see one.
on what they're saying McBride is dealing with, but that's a big concern for New York at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. So, Ian, the last question I always ask everybody on the sport profile is just your professional career aside, your work covering the Knicks aside, just really you as a person. Ian Begley, what's something you like most or admire about yourself?
I'm a big critic of myself, so
Same.
yeah. I don't know. I guess I'd say that
No wrong answer.
I try to be kind to people, especially strangers
Yeah.
and people that I'm around, unless you give me a reason to be unkind. And I
Yeah.
think my threshold there is on the higher side. I try to treat people with kindness, treat people with respect at baseline. And so that would be, I guess, one thing that, yeah, if you made me say I'm proud of myself for something, that's what I would go with, just the respect.
That is an amazing, amazing thing to be proud of. And may we all continue to be kind and authentic in the interactions that we have. Ian Begley, thank you so much for coming on.
Dylan, my pleasure, my friend. Be well.
Thank you, man. You too.